Welcome to the fingerprinting elimination fingerprint exercise that we are going to demonstrate for the class today. So Agatha and I will be doing the elimination prints. Agatha is going to be the subject for the elimination prints. Now the purpose of doing this in the first place is for a few different options. So the acronym, as explained during the lecture, is ICE, which is incriminate, corroborate, and eliminate. Those are the reasons why you would be taking elimination fingerprints. So for instance, if you had a situation where you as an investigator go to a crime scene and there is limited access for people other than the homeowners or the business operators, that the expectation is if you find fingerprints as an investigator, that those fingerprints should be either the homeowner or the business owner or an employer of that, an employee of that business. So by taking their elimination prints, it saves a few things. First off, it eliminates having to load erroneous fingerprints onto a database and label them as potential suspect fingerprints, when in fact they belong to the owner or the owner of a business, an employee, or a homeowner. So I guess we'll get started. So the form here that we have is a kind of a modification of what's known as a C216 form, C216, which is the criminal form for fingerprints that's taken. It was designed by the RCMP, who are the federal police, and they are the keepers of the national database for fingerprints in Canada. The elimination fingerprint system is designed strictly for that, for the elimination of potential persons of involvement, and it is not searched against any national database whatsoever. So when we are attending crime scenes and potentially taking fingerprints from, say, a homeowner, we advise them that those fingerprints are only used for comparative purposes in the event that fingerprints are obtained at the crime scene and they are not compared to any national database and are either stored or destroyed at the insistence of the homeowner. So let's get started. So we have this set up here. We've got two cameras that are viewing this. So we have the overall camera so that you can see what we are doing generally, and then we have another camera that is mounted for focusing more on where the fingerprints are. So the form that we are using, and I'll just hold this up. I'm sure Agatha will probably do something a little bit more in depth with this. But you can see that there are a series of 10 boxes. The top row is for the right hand, starting with the thumb and working from the index through to the little finger. And likewise, the lower boxes are for the left hand, again, starting from the thumb and working outward towards the little finger. The boxes here are designated for left and right hands, including the flat portion. So basically just the fingers themselves, and then additionally the thumb, and we'll explain that as we go through. The other information that's recorded at the bottom is, again, similar to the information that's recorded on the C216 form. Basically who took the fingerprints, when the fingerprints were taken, who the subject person was that had their fingerprints taken, and potentially some physical descriptors of that subject. On the reverse side of the form, again, there is a division between the left and the right hands, and this is for the entire impression. So an entire palm and finger impression taken together. So let's get started. So we have a couple of different ways of taking fingerprints for elimination prints. The first one that we're going to do is using, for most of the ones that we're going to use, we're going to be using this retaining system here. And it's simply just a placeholder for the paper to be inserted to stabilize it while you are using it. So it has a hinged back on it, and an area to slide the paper in underneath of a bar, and then you can re-engage the locking mechanism here that will hold the paper in place. So you simply align it so that the digits will be such that the first flexion crease of the finger will be within the boxed area. Now by lining it up like this, flattening it down, it kind of stabilizes, it keeps the paper flat. One other thing with or a couple of other points of interest with these holders is that they have rubber pads on the bottom to stop it from sliding, as well as there is a flange or an overhang here on the metal, so when it is tucked up against the edge of a desk or a counter surface, that it holds it in place so it won't shift around while you're taking the prints. Now, in the event that it is a criminal matter, so just going away from the elimination prints, and if you are maybe a person is lawfully in custody under the Identification of Criminals Act, it gives the police the authority to take fingerprints and photographs of people when they are in custody. And again, I will default to the lecture to explain that in more detail. So in the event that we'll use Agatha as an example, if she was a criminal and she was in lawful custody, and I'm taking her fingerprints, as an armed police officer, I would want to be cognizant of the fact that I'm right-handed, she's on my right side, but also my sidearm is there as well. So for security purposes, you want to make sure that you're aware that there is a potential for her to try to disarm me or go for my firearm. So when you are in lawful custody, the police are authorized to use whatever forces is reasonably necessary to affect the purpose of taking fingerprints. So you're not allowed to use excessive force, but in order to secure the set of fingerprints, you are entitled to use force. Now, in most cases, that's not going to be an issue. On the rare occasions, it may be required. Now, again, defaulting back to the lecture and talking about the information that's properly sworn before the court, it is at that point that the person is actually being charged with the offense. So the formal information has to be sworn before a provincial court judge, and at that point, it authorizes the police to take the fingerprints from people that are in custody. There is a consideration with the court system that if there is no issues and people are in compliance with taking their prints or having their prints taken, then it's a non-issue. That form doesn't necessarily have to be signed before the prints are taken. If the person is putting up a struggle or is refusing to cooperate to have their prints taken, that form, that information to say that these charges are now in effect, has to be sworn first before any use of force is implied. So the person would be put back into a holding cell. The information would be taken before a justice or a provincial court judge, get sworn to validate that form, and then the police would use as much force as necessary to effect the purpose. You are allowed to take as many fingerprints as necessary to get what you consider to be a quality set of prints. So if the person is struggling, or if the prints don't turn out properly because of physical constraint, then you can continue to take as many prints as necessary in order to get a quality, usable set of fingerprints. So we have a couple of different ways. Now we'll go back to taking our elimination fingerprints now. Obviously, I'm not going to need to use force against Agatha because she's voluntarily giving her prints for the elimination purposes. So for this purpose, we have these, what's referred to as a Portland pad. It is a hard material that is absorbent, and it has impregnated in it fingerprint ink. So it does have a life expectancy of several years. It can be shortened if it's exposed to air, but these things last for a considerable amount of time. So this is the first technique that we are going to use, using the elimination forms and using the porcelain pad. Now, if Agatha was in custody, as opposed to voluntarily giving her elimination prints, once you take physical control of the person, then it gives you a sense if they are potentially going to try to break free or to become assaultive. So by maintaining physical control, it will give you that edge and that control and that signal that maybe something is going to come. What I would suggest is when you are taking the fingerprints, that you pinch right around the flexion, the knuckle joint of the person, which will help to extend the finger straight. You can also use, if you kind of hold the tip of the finger between your index finger and thumb, and you can use that as a guide to rotate the person's digit. Now, taking into consideration anatomically how flexible we are, take that into consideration when you're rolling the person, because not everyone is as flexible as other people. So you want to have some consideration that they may not have the ability to rotate in a certain direction or that same rotation depending on the person and depending on the hand.
Alrighty.
Okay, so as I said, we're going to do it as an elimination thing. I'm right-handed, so I keep my subject on the right side. Try to have everything kind of in alignment so that you're not having to move a person, you're not like rowing a boat kind of thing where you're extending your arms fully like that. You want to try and keep it so that they are in alignment with the pad. Now, ideally, because anatomically you can rotate your arm much better if it's fully extended, including your hand, this counter surface that we're using here is a little bit lower than what would be an ideal height because as I put Agatha's hand down, there is now going to be a break. It's going to adjust the angle of the hand, which is going to affect the rotation of the arm. Ideally, if you can keep it more straight in a line at a height similar to that, you're going to get a much better result. Now, the appearance of the fingerprints as we do this, the rolled impressions, as they are referred to as that rolling action, should appear to be pretty much as a square. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the demonstration. So you want to have the person distracted. So either talk to the person to take their mind off it, have them read something, or look somewhere else. You want to be in control while you're doing this. You don't want the person to be assisting you in rolling the prints. So any motion that you are doing, location and the motion that you are completing, you want to be doing it. You don't want the person to be helping you. So you want to start, because the idea behind this is we are trying to do it in a rotation that the ink covers from the flexion crease up to the tip of the finger. Now, the thumb being larger and having a curvature, you may not get necessarily that same amount of ink on the tip of the thumb, but we'll see how we make out. So ideally, you want to do this in a continuous motion. So as I said, you can kind of hold the fingertip with your index finger and thumb and do it in a continuous motion. Once you make contact with the paper, continue right through from nail bed to nail bed as you're doing that rotation. You don't want to stop momentarily in the middle because it could alter the impression. So again, as we do this, there's the thumb. Now before you do the rolling of the next finger or drop this thumb, you want to grab the next finger for a couple of purposes. If she was in custody, I would have that signal that she was going to try and break free, but also it keeps your order in alignment. So I know that I've done the thumb. Now I don't drop the thumb until I pick up the next finger, and so on. Sometimes it's difficult for people to get their digits out of the way. As I said, not everybody is as flexible. Okay, so we've done the first row. The right hand, we'll just realign the paper here for the second row. Start with the left hand. The problem with the Portland pads is as they dry out, the quantity of ink varies, and sometimes you don't get as dark of an impression. There's less ink, so that can be a troublesome issue. If you have a person that has long fingernails, that is a problem as well. The fingernails tend to get in the way. Sometimes jewelry as well can be an issue. So I've lowered it down now to do the flats. So we'll start off with the right hand. And as I said, the Portland pads, not really a great fan of them. They are a useful tool, but it wouldn't necessarily be my go-to way of taking fingerprints because of the inconsistency of the amount of ink on the Portland pad. As well, the size of the pad. It's limited in size, especially if you have someone that has larger or longer fingers. It's difficult to get all of them in contact. Now, when you're doing this, you want to have ink. We're doing the flat impressions. We're not going to worry about the thumb right now. So you want to have kind of pinch the person's fingers together so that they kind of keep close in proximity. And I'll just do that one more time here. This is probably dried out. When you're putting the fingers down on it, you may have to toe the angle inwards a little bit to allow sufficient room for the prints to be applied. And just a light contact should be sufficient. Now for this one here, we are going to do the thumb as well. And the thumb just goes in its anatomical position within that box. Left hand now. Pull it in slightly. Nice light pressure. And then we do the thumb. So one thing I should point out is that it doesn't matter how many times you do this, and I've done literally thousands of these in the past, they never turn out perfect. Very few occasions do you actually have an entire set of fingerprints that are perfect. Ideally, what we are looking for with this is the fingerprint should appear in a complete square because you're rolling from nail bed to nail bed. As well, you would like to have a few layers of ridge detail below that first flexion crease to be visible within the impression as well. Ideally, the print should be centralized within the box. You don't want scalped edges from areas like, for instance, here with the thumb. You can see the dip where there was a lack of ink in the center area. Ideally, you want to have a consistent amount of ink so that it's easier to read. You have to remember, these fingerprints are going to be used by a trained fingerprint analyst or an identification officer to compare them against the crime scene impressions that have been recovered at the scene. If the quality is lacking in the elimination prints, it makes it all the more challenging to try and eliminate the person. Okay, so we'll do the reverse now. So we're going to do the palm impressions. Now, the problem with the Portland pad is that oftentimes you end up with lines from the outside of the pad because you're trying to ink the entire palmar portion of the hand, including the fingers and the palm. And just because of the contour of the hand, it makes it difficult for literally a brick to reach into those recesses and cover all the areas. Now this particular pad, you can see I'm making contact with it, but it's almost at the point that it's exhausted. It's getting very dry, and it's near the end of its life expectancy. Now you can see the natural cupping in the center of the palm area. It creates a void. Very difficult to get the ink into that area. Sometimes you may actually have to rub it in with your fingers a little bit to make good contact. Now, when we are doing this, you want to have it centrally located a little bit over towards the left area, because we also want to include some other components on this as we go through. So as the hand goes down, use the heel of your hand on the back of the other person's hand and just put a little bit of weight on it. And what that does is it flattens it out and replicates the area of that cupping that would, on some occasions, be not visible. It's very faint here, but at least you can see it. Now, continuing on with this, we also want to include the thumb. And the thumb impression that goes on the back is a little bit different than the one on the front. The flat impressions that are created on the left and right on the front page are simply just a contact impression. The one that goes on the back starts as a contact impression, but then gets rolled up to include the very tip up to where the nail, to where the top of the nail is. Because just the contour of the thumb itself on a flat impression, those ridge details that are right at the very tip are not being reproduced. So by rolling the thumb, it now incorporates that area as well. Okay, so we'll just do the writer's palm is next. So the area here, right along the fleshy area on the palm, also needs to be captured as well. And on a flat impression, that does not get reproduced. So the idea behind this is it's referred to as a writer's palm. So if you are writing where your hand is resting, that's basically the area of that palm impression that is creating the detail. So make a blade of a knife with the hand, put it to the outside edge of where the existing impression is, and just put a little bit of pressure on there to replicate it. So you can see the writer's palm looks like this. And again, just because of the contour of the hand, there are areas here on the fingers that aren't being reproduced, but that's expected. It's more this area here that we're concerned with, being the palm, the writer's palm area itself. So we'll just do the left hand as well. This pull-on pad is pretty much done. Thing. Heel of the hand, a little bit of pressure, flatten out that area in the center, and then we do the writer's palm. Barely even see any ink coming off on this one. Have the person form the blade of a knife, pressure down, I see the pressure applied. And then the last component again is the rotating thumb. So again, flat impression and then rotate the tip of the thumb up. Okay, so that would be what the completed set of palm impressions look like. And again, the front.